So here's the thing about the Galactic Council, right? They love giving warnings. Oh man, do they love it. You'd think warnings were their favorite hobby, like some kind of intergalactic hobby shop where the only product they sell is dire warnings and consequences. When humanity finally made first contact through our little deep space mining operation on Kepler 442b, the first thing the Council did wasn't to say hello. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Wasn't to introduce themselves. Nope. They showed up with what I can only describe as a cosmic cease and desist letter, delivered by the Sethrian delegation, who are basically tall gray beings that look like they perpetually need a vacation and probably spend their weekends complaining about how nobody listens to them anyway. The warning was simple, clear, and absolutely ridiculous. The message came through every channel we had simultaneously, which was definitely not terrifying or anything. Absolutely normal first contact procedure. They said, and I quote from the official Council transmission, that Marcus from Communications still has saved on his terminal because he thinks it's funny. The young of the Velkovian species are inherently dangerous to non-Velkovian life forms. Direct contact with the cubs is strictly prohibited under penalty of celestial law. Failure to comply will result in immediate quarantine and potential exile from all Council-affiliated space sectors. Now, can we just appreciate the drama of that for a second? Yeah, we knew we were alone in the universe, and now there's an entire freaking galactic community out there. And their first message to us is basically, do not touch the space puppies or we will destroy you. That's like your first day at a new job, and your boss immediately says, hey, great to meet you, but whatever you do, don't go near the break room tiger cubs, or you're fired, and also we'll tell all future employers you're a tiger cub botherer. The Velkovians themselves came to deliver this warning in person, which was honestly kind of cool in a terrifying sort of way. Imagine your first contact situation, yeah? You're going about your business, mining rare isotopes and eating freeze-dried pizza because you're a week away from supply ship arrival. And suddenly these massive aliens show up. The Velkovians are roughly humanoid, but everything about them is bigger, stronger, and somehow angrier. They're like if you took a tiger and a bear and had a baby, then fed that baby nothing but steroids and rage for 200 years. Their fur is a deep midnight blue that shimmers purple in certain light. And they have these eyes that are probably evolved to track prey across cosmic distances or something equally terrifying. Anyway, so there we were, the entire human contingent of about 150 people, standing in the landing bay, wearing what we thought were impressive diplomatic attire, which was basically just our best jumpsuits, because we didn't have a diplomatic corps. We had geologists. We had engineers. We had Marcus, who technically qualified as IT personnel, but mostly just played games on the servers when nobody was looking. And we were about to meet actual aliens who were immediately pissed at us for something we hadn't even done yet. The lead Velkovian stepped forward, and his voice was like distant thunder mixed with a roaring engine and a disappointed parent all at once. His name was impossible to pronounce, but we just called him Throck in our heads because he looked like a Throck. Actually, later we learned his name translated to something like Destroyer of Soft Things That Move Poorly. Which, fair assessment of humanity, honestly. He delivered the warning with the enthusiasm of someone reading tax code to a classroom of bored teenagers. Your species has made planetary entry, he rumbled. The cubs have sensed your presence. They are curious. This is dangerous for you. Curiosity of the young Velkovian is not something your primitive bioforms can withstand. Stay inside your facilities. Do not venture beyond the designated barriers. Do not, under any circumstances, approach the cubs. Then he paused and looked at us like we were all collectively the dumbest beings in the universe. To be fair, considering what happened later, he might have had a point. This will be the only warning. Deviate from these guidelines, and your entire species will be quarantined. You will have no trade, no access to council territories, no advancement in technology. You will remain a collection of rocks on a remote planet, dying out slowly while the rest of the universe moves forward without you. Am I understood? Well, that was certainly motivational. Nothing says welcome to the galactic community quite like existential threats delivered by a creature that could probably snap you like a twig while eating lunch. We agreed, obviously. We had no choice. What were we going to do? Argue with these massive space tigers? Our most advanced weapon was a plasma rifle that we were pretty sure would tickle them. So we agreed to stay inside. We agreed to follow their rules. We agreed to pretend we didn't see the cubs when they showed up on the surveillance cameras about 6 hours later. And oh man, did they show up. At first, it was just on the perimeter. The cubs, and I'm capitalizing that now because apparently that's their official designation according to the council notes, were massive. I mean, they looked young compared to Throck and the others. But young for a Velkovian still meant roughly the size of a large horse with way too many teeth. They had the same beautiful midnight blue fur with purple shimmer, and eyes that seemed impossibly intelligent and curious. They prowled around our facility's outer boundary, their massive paws leaving impressions in the regolith that were just sort of permanently visible forever now because there's no weather to smooth them out. Okay, protocol says we don't approach them, said Jovian, who was technically our leader, though I use that term loosely because Jovian's main qualification was that she'd read the most books about leadership and could talk for impressively long periods without saying anything actually useful. She was peering at the surveillance screens from the control room, which was probably against several safety codes, but in the interest of seeing the space tigers, nobody was going to complain. We stay here. We watch from a distance. We don't go out there. We don't interact. We don't make any sudden movements that might attract their attention. This is a test of discipline. This is a test of humanity's ability to follow interstellar law. This is our chance to show the Galactic Council that we are a peaceful, cooperative species. That was her official statement. What she actually meant was, oh my God, there are space tiger cubs out there, and if we mess this up, we're all getting exiled to the cosmic equivalent of Siberia. Which is probably just regular Siberia, now that I think about it. The universe probably just outsources its punishment to planets that already have the infrastructure. So we watched. We watched for 3 days while the cubs circled our compound. They didn't attack. They didn't seem aggressive. They just wandered around. Sometimes they'd sit down. Sometimes they'd make these vocalizations that were kind of like chirping mixed with the sound of a glacier calving. Sometimes they'd look directly at the cameras, and it felt like they knew we were in there watching them. Which was probably true because, let's be honest, they were probably a lot smarter than we were. Having evolved over millions of years while we spent our time inventing things like social media and reality television. Marcus started naming them. He was that kind of guy. The first one he called Whiskers, which was spectacularly uncreative. But it stuck. There was another one he called Princess because she had this little tuft of fur on her head that looked kind of crown-like if you were generous with your imagination and had been looking at monitors for too long. The third one became Trouble because, honestly, that felt accurate. This one had this way of doing things that just screamed chaos. It would knock things over. It would circle the compound in patterns that made no sense. It would occasionally charge at the fence and then stop about a meter away, like it was testing to see what would happen. 4 days in, things got weird. Well, weirder. We had an accident. One of our engineers, a woman named Petra, who was absolutely brilliant with thermal regulators and absolutely terrible at following instructions, decided that she needed to venture outside to check on one of the exterior sensors. It wasn't technically against protocol if she stayed within 50 meters of the airlock, though the spirit of the protocol was probably being violated pretty hard. She put on her suit, she checked the seals, she went through all the proper procedures. Very professional. What she didn't expect was for Whiskers to be lounging directly outside the airlock when she opened it. Now, here's where I need you to picture this correctly, because the comedy of the situation is absolutely crucial. Petra opens the airlock door. She steps outside, looking down at her tablet where the sensor readout is displayed. She's not paying attention to anything else. She's thinking about thermal regulation and probably planning what she's going to have for dinner, which is always some kind of rehydrated something because we're on a mining colony and we don't get fresh food out here. Her suit's white and blue, very professional looking, very, I am a competent engineer who definitely knows what she's doing. She looks up from her tablet and is suddenly face to face with approximately 2 tons of space tiger cub. Now, I have to tell you, I was watching this on the surveillance feeds, and I'm pretty sure I watched Petra's entire life flash across her face in the span of about 3 seconds. I could see her hand go up. I could see her taking a step backward. I could see her mouth moving, which probably meant she was screaming or praying or both simultaneously. The cub, Whiskers, did this thing where he tilted his head, looking at her with what I can only describe as intense, focused curiosity. Then, and this is the part that gets me every single time I think about it, Whiskers did something that I'm absolutely certain violated at least 17 different clauses of the Galactic Council warning. He sat down, just plopped his massive frame down on the regolith and stared at Petra like she was the most interesting thing that had ever existed in the history of existence. Princess in Trouble came running over, and suddenly Petra was surrounded by 3 massive space tiger cubs who seemed genuinely fascinated by her. "Jovian," I said through the comm, keeping my voice as calm as I possibly could, while internally screaming, "We have a situation." "I can see," she replied, and I could hear the barely controlled panic in her voice. "Petra, back away slowly. Do not make sudden movements." Petra, to her credit, held absolutely still for about 10 seconds. Then Whiskers did something that I'm still not sure how to categorize. He made this soft vocalization, kind of like a purr but deeper, and he reached out one of his massive paws. I'm talking a paw the size of Petra's entire torso, and he very, very gently touched her helmet. I'm going to be honest with you. At that moment, I thought we were done. I thought this was it. The cubs were going to give Petra a friendly little pat, and it would probably reduce her to her constituent atoms, because mass times acceleration equals force, and these things weighed several thousand kilograms each. But nothing happened. The paw made contact, and then withdrew. Whiskers made another of those purr-roar sounds, and then, in what I can only describe as the most baffling sequence of events that has ever occurred in the history of first contact scenarios, he lay down. All 3 of them did. They lay down around Petra like they were forming a protective barrier, like they were, I don't know, keeping her warm, protecting her, treating her like she was one of them. "Petra, report," Jovian said, and her voice was climbing about 3 octaves. "There," Petra said, and her voice came through the comm all shaky and terrified. "They're just lying here. They're not attacking. They're just lying here. One of them is actually purring. Well, I think it's purring. It's making vibrations that I can feel through the ground. I'm absolutely going to need therapy after this. Get back to the airlock, now. So Petra started moving backward, very slowly. And here's where the story takes a turn into absolutely hilarious chaos, because Whiskers got up and followed her. Not aggressively, just followed, like he was making sure she got home safely. The other two followed too, and the three of them proceeded to escort Petra all the way back to the airlock door, while we all watched from the control room with expressions I'm pretty sure would be hilarious if I could see them. She got through the door. She sealed the lock. We all stood there in silence for a moment. "Okay," Jovian said finally. "Nobody goes outside. Those things are obviously not operating on normal behavioral patterns. The council warned us about contact with the Cubs, and look what happened. One scout mission, and they're already attached to us." Attached to us? That was putting it mildly. Within an hour, the Cubs had moved directly adjacent to our main airlock. They didn't try to attack the facility. They didn't try to breach anything. They just settled down outside like they were waiting for something. Or someone. Specifically Petra. "This is a test," Marcus said, which was probably the first intelligent thing Marcus had ever said in his life. "This is the Galactic Council testing us. They set up the situation with Petra to see if we would follow protocol or if we'd mess up. This is clearly a setup." "That's actually a really good point," I admitted, which annoyed Marcus because he'd spent 3 years on the colony with me, making fun of his gaming habits and his tendency to eat snacks in the server room, leaving crumbs everywhere. But he was right. This had setup written all over it. Here's the thing about the Galactic Council, though, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier. They are not actually that creative. When they want to test a species, they usually follow the same playbook. Create a scenario. Make it tempting to violate the rules. See if the species is disciplined enough to follow protocol anyway. Except the Cubs were not following the program. Because the next thing that happened was that they started making noise. And not the kind of noise that was meant to be aggressive or scary. It was actually the exact opposite. They were making these soft chirping sounds, these communicative vocalizations. And after a while, we realized what they were doing. They were trying to talk to us. "Is anyone else hearing this?" Jovian asked through the comm. "Affirmative," said one of the linguists, a woman named Helena, who spent most of her time reading ancient Earth literature and probably wasn't actually qualified to analyze alien vocalizations, but was definitely the closest thing we had to a linguistic expert on a mining colony. "I'm recording it. These sounds have a pattern. There's structure. There's meaning here." Helena ran the vocalizations through every translation algorithm we had, which honestly weren't very good because, again, mining colony, not a research station. But she found patterns, repetition, structure. The Cubs were definitely communicating something, even if we had no idea what it was. "This is it," Jovian said, and she sounded genuinely frustrated. "This is the test. They're trying to get us to break protocol by making us curious about their communications. We maintain radio silence. We do not engage. We wait for this to pass." And that would have been great advice if it wasn't for the fact that someone, and I'm not going to name names, but it was definitely Marcus because he was the only person dumb enough to do this, decided that maintaining radio silence didn't technically mean we couldn't read the signals ourselves and maybe try to figure out what the Cubs were saying. In his defense, he wasn't trying to communicate back. He was just trying to understand them. It's like the difference between reading a letter that was meant for someone else and actually responding to it. Marcus spent 8 hours running every kind of pattern recognition software he could find. He cross-referenced the cub's sounds with natural languages, artificial languages, mathematical sequences, music theory, and probably like 5 other things I can't remember because I wasn't paying attention, because I was too busy being frustrated that Marcus was doing something incredibly stupid. And then, just as everyone was about to force Marcus to stop before he got us all exiled, he cracked it. Not perfectly, not completely. But he found enough of the pattern to realize what the cubs were basically trying to say. And when I tell you that the implications of his discovery were absolutely world-ending in terms of how we were supposed to follow protocol, I'm not exaggerating. The cubs were asking about Petra. Specifically, they were making sounds that, when run through Marcus's impromptu translation algorithm, basically boiled down to variations on, where is the small soft one? And why did the small soft one leave? And most disturbingly, is the small soft one okay? That's impossible, Helena said, peering at Marcus's work. There's no context for complex emotional inquiry in their vocalizations. That's not what I'm seeing. Look at the pattern again, Marcus said, and for once he sounded completely serious. There, and there. And see this sequence? This is definitely concern. And this part, that's definitely affection. They're not attacking. They're not testing us. They're worried about her. Now here's where we all sat with that information for a while. Because think about what that means. This powerful, dangerous alien species that the Galactic Council specifically warned us about, whose cubs are supposedly inherently dangerous to non-Velkovian life forms, had met a human and decided that human was worth protecting. They had formed some kind of attachment, and based on their behavior so far, that attachment was not superficial. This is still a test, Jovian insisted, but her voice was wavering now. She didn't sound convinced anymore. She sounded scared. Because here's the thing about the Galactic Council and their tests. They usually don't involve the test subjects developing genuine emotional connections to you. And if they do, it usually doesn't end well for anyone involved. Petra had been quiet through all of this, sitting in the engineering bay with the thermometer readings because she didn't have anything else to do, and was probably still processing the fact that she'd had a 2-ton space tiger gently touch her helmet. Now she stood up and walked over to the comm station. "I'm going back out," she said. "Absolutely not," Jovian said immediately. "Why not? They didn't hurt me. They protected me. And right now, they're sitting outside my airlock making distressed vocalizations because they can't see me. If I don't go out there, they're just going to keep getting more agitated, and eventually they might actually do something dangerous trying to figure out what happened to me. The council warned us. The council warned us not to approach the cubs," Petra interrupted. "I didn't approach them. They approached me. I didn't seek attachment. They did. And right now, they're basically having an anxiety attack because they think I'm gone. That's not a test. That's a living creature experiencing genuine distress, and I'm the only one who can fix it." There was something about the way Petra said it that just made sense, you know? Like, yes, the council had warned us, but the cubs weren't following the council's playbook. They were being themselves. And what they were being was protective and affectionate, and clearly bonded to Petra in a way that was irreversible at this point. "If we do this," Jovian said slowly, "and the council finds out, we're exiled. The entire colony, potentially the entire human species. If we don't do this," Petra countered, "they're going to get more agitated. They're massive, powerful creatures with nothing to restrain them. You think that's a better outcome?" There was a solid minute of silence in the control room. Everyone was looking at Jovian like she was supposed to have the answer, like she had some sort of advanced degree in first contact protocol or crisis management, which she didn't. She just had the job because she was good at reading books and talking about them. Finally, she made a decision that I'm pretty sure violated about 17 different intergalactic treaties. Okay, but suit up. Keep communications open. If anything goes wrong, you get back inside immediately. And Marcus, you tell no one about Marcus figuring out what they were saying. We did not decode their communications. We did not establish linguistic contact. Officially, we have no idea what they want. Petra was back in her suit within 5 minutes. She opened the airlock, and the sounds from outside changed immediately. The cub's vocalizations went from concerned to something that I can only describe as joyful. Petra stepped outside, and Whiskers basically tackled her with enthusiasm that somehow managed to be incredibly dangerous and incredibly gentle at the same time. From the surveillance feeds, we watched Petra get surrounded by cubs again. But this time, they weren't just protecting her. They were interacting with her, pressing their massive heads against her suit, making those soft, purring roar sounds. The one we called Trouble actually lay down completely and let Petra sit on its back like it was a horse and she was taking a casual ride. "This is amazing," Helena whispered. "This is the first meaningful contact between two sentient species, and it's completely unscheduled and definitely against every protocol we have. This is the kind of thing that gets written about in history. This is what gets taught in schools. This is the thing that changes the entire trajectory of human-alien relations. This is also the thing that gets us all permanently exiled from council space," someone else muttered. But honestly, at that point, I don't think anyone cared. We were watching history happen. And yeah, it was a violation of protocol. But it was beautiful in a way that made the protocol seem kind of ridiculous. Petra stayed outside for 3 hours. She talked to the cubs, even though they couldn't understand her words, but could probably understand her tone. She let them touch her. She touched them back. She found out that Whiskers liked being scratched behind the ears, and that Princess made this specific vocalization every time she did something good that was basically Velkovian for "good job, I guess." And that Trouble had absolutely no self-control and would demolish anything left unattended, which actually explained a lot about the name choice. And through it all, the cubs never once tried to hurt her. Never once showed any aggression. They were just 3 young alien creatures who had decided that one human was special and deserved their protection and affection. When Petra finally came back inside, she was smiling in a way that I hadn't seen in months of being on this colony. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked like someone who had experienced something important and life-changing and had found it absolutely incredible. The cubs didn't leave. They stayed outside the airlock for another 2 days, but their vocalizations changed. The worried chirping became more casual. The protective posturing relaxed. They seemed to understand that Petra was in there, safe, and that she wasn't abandoning them. They were just waiting, patient, content to be near her even if they couldn't directly interact. Then, on day 3 of what we were now calling the Cubs situation, internally, Throck showed up. He came back to the colony with the same group of Velkovians, and he looked exactly like someone who had received a report about protocol violations and was extremely disappointed in everyone involved. He emerged from the shuttle with the kind of gait that suggested he was about to do some serious cosmic justice. Jovian met him in the landing bay, which was incredibly brave considering Throck could probably snap her in half without breaking a sweat. She had her shoulders back, her chin up, her entire demeanor screaming, "I made a decision, and I'm standing by it." "The Cubs," Throck rumbled, his voice like a thunderstorm preparing to destroy everything in its path. "Your species has violated direct council decree. You have approached the Cubs. You have established contact. You have violated the protocol set forth for the protection of your own species." "With respect," Jovian said. "And I'm not sure where she got the courage for this, because I was definitely not that brave. Your Cubs approached us. They established contact with us. We were inside the facility. Your Cubs came to us. We didn't violate the spirit of your protocol. We just responded to circumstances that were beyond our control." Throck stared at her. He stared like he could look directly through her and see into her soul and judge her for everything she'd ever done wrong in her entire life. "Show me," he said finally. So we did. We took him to the surveillance feeds. We showed him everything. The initial encounter with Petra, the vocalizations, the protective behavior, all of it. And the whole time, Throck just stared. And his expression didn't change. And I was absolutely certain that this was it. Humanity was done. We were going to be exiled, and it was all Marcus's fault for not being able to keep his genetic curiosity in check. Then Throck did something totally unexpected. He made a sound. It was a rumbling laugh, deep and genuine and absolutely terrifying, but definitely laughter. "The Cubs," he said, and he was still laughing. "The Cubs chose. This is not protocol violation. This is Cubs choosing. This happens sometimes. The young ones see something in a species and they decide. When they decide, there is no undoing it. It is the way of our people." He turned to look at Petra directly. "You," he said, "the small soft one. You have bonded with them. This is actually quite impressive. The Cubs do not bond often. They are selective. Your species must be more remarkable than we initially assessed." "So," Jovian asked carefully, "we're not exiled?" "Exiled?" Throck laughed again. "No. But you are now something else. You are bonded species. The Cubs have chosen you. They will protect you. They will consider themselves part of your colony. And you," he pointed at Petra again, "you will be Cub Friend. This is a title of honor among our people. You have responsibilities now. The Cubs will look to you. They will obey you. They will see you as pack leader." And that was how humanity went from being warned never to approach the Cubs to having the Cubs officially adopt our colony and become our permanent neighbors and protectors. The Galactic Council wasn't thrilled about the situation. But honestly, what could they do? The Cubs had chosen. Velkovian law, apparently, was very clear about Cubs having autonomous decision-making rights once they reached a certain age. And these Cubs were definitely past that age. There was a whole big meeting about it, and in the end, the council decided that if the Cubs had bonded with us, then humanity had to be treated as a protected species because you don't mess with Velkovian young once they've made their choice. So now, we had 3 space tiger cubs that considered themselves part of our operation. They helped with security. They helped with resource collection. Whiskers developed a surprising talent for identifying mineral deposits, which made him incredibly valuable to our mining operation. Princess decided she liked organizing our supply storeroom, which was both hilarious and somehow effective. Trouble, true to his name, mostly just caused chaos, but in a way that was so entertaining that nobody really minded. And Petra became the most important person on the colony. She was Cub Friend, holder of the title, Keeper of the Peace, the one who could negotiate with 3 space tigers in their native language of vocalizations and body language. 6 months into the arrangement, we got a message from the Galactic Council. We thought it was bad news. It wasn't. They wanted to study the human-Velkovian bond. They wanted to understand how we'd achieved something that no other species had managed. They wanted to establish formal relations with humanity as a species that had successfully integrated with another sapient species. Turns out, the Cubs breaking protocol and deciding they liked us was the best thing that could have happened to humanity's integration into the galactic community. Petra told me later, when we were sitting in the common area watching Whiskers attempt to fit his entire massive head through a doorway that was definitely too small for him, that she thought the whole thing was less about the Cubs being dangerous or the Council testing us, and more about the Cubs just being curious and young and looking for connection. "They're not monsters," she said. "The Council treated them like they were these dangerous weapons or something we needed to fear. But they're just individuals. They have personality, they have preferences, they have feelings. The Council was so focused on warning us about what they might do that they completely missed what they actually are. And that, I think, is the real story here. Not about humans bravely violating protocol to make friends with aliens. Not about some grand first contact scenario that changed everything. But about how sometimes the most important discoveries come from just treating living beings like individuals instead of statistics. From seeing them as they are instead of what you're told to be afraid of. The Cubs stayed with us on Kepler 442b. They became part of the colony. They helped us grow and expand and eventually welcome even more species to our little mining operation. They trained their own Cubs, and those Cubs learned to tolerate humans, which was a big deal in terms of long-term relationships. And Trouble, because of course Trouble, eventually found his way into Marcus's server room and ate approximately half the snack stash before anyone noticed. Marcus didn't even mind. He just laughed and said that having a space tiger endorse your snack choices was probably the highest honor he could achieve in his lifetime. So yeah, that's what happened. The Galactic Council warned us about the Cubs. The Cubs decided the warning was irrelevant. We decided that following a warning that made no sense was less important than responding to individual beings who needed connection. Best first contact story ever, honestly. No weapons involved, no casualties. Just 3 massive space tiger cubs, 1 human engineer, and the slow realization that understanding usually beats fear, even in space.